Welcome to Stories from the 3 Billion Under 30, featuring interviews with world-class millennials as well as the celebrities, Fortune 500 executives, and mentors that guide us. Welcome to another episode of Stories from the 3 Billion Under 30. I'm with a 3 Billion Under 30 contributor, Matthew Brimer. Matthew from Daybreaker fame, Matthew from General Assembly fame. You've had a couple of other businesses in your formative years that maybe are not that famous or as famous, but do you want to give us the official intro, or how do you intro yourself at a party? How do you intro yourself on the dance floor?
So I try to avoid jumping into the question of what do you do, and try to connect with someone on maybe a more personal level first. I guess I'm a creative. I'm an entrepreneur, general instigator of mischief. I think at my core, I love creating experiences. I love empowering, thinking about how can we create ways to empower people and inspire them and give them the mindset or the skills or the opportunity to sort of move forward in their lives and become the best versions of themselves. And then to think about how we can create community around all of that. And so in one form that has manifested into a global phenomenon and movement with Daybreaker of creating sort of healthy morning dance parties. And
which do you realize, literally my wallet's here and $400 have come from my physical or virtual wallet to the Daybreaker account. So.
You're very, very generous. Thank you. It's been, that thing, started as an art project, a social experiment, has become, an incredible phenomenon. And then with General Assembly, it's about creating an educational institution for the digital economy, and a lot of that, and we're doing a lot more online education now as well, and really reaching many more people through our online programs. But most of it, most of our work now, and ever since our founding, has been in person. We have campuses, General Assembly campuses in 15 cities around the world. And as we grow, we're doing more and more hybrid and blended learning. And I think that's really the way of the future in general. But it turns out when people are learning hard stuff, they still need to be around people. Even if you can learn something online, being face-to-face, to connect, to collaborate, to share, to have that sort of support from a community of people is a powerful thing. So, I love thinking about community and what does the future of community mean, and how can we all have the tools and the abilities to create community in our own lives, in our own businesses, because that's so necessary in today's sort of fractured world.
Yeah, and I would say this conversation was one that we were going to use in 3 Billion Under 30 and use to kind of guide Matthew's story for the book, but we wanted to share it with you on the web show because it was really valuable. I didn't have to talk. Matthew just gave us all these amazing anecdotes to learn from, as well as some practical advice. So we'll let that roll right after we tell you where you can find Matthew online, but where can we find you online?
Sure. So most of my social media handles are just at Brimer, Brimer, or you can do a Google search. General Assembly's website is ga.co, and Daybreaker's website is daybreaker.com. I also advise and am sort of supporting a handful of other startups, which hopefully we'll be hearing about some of those soon.
What are you curious about most right now? Where do you, now that you're going into this slightly more relaxed time in your life, what are you thinking about, at least in terms of future projects?
So I've done a few startups, and I have a few startups under my belt now, and I continue to be excited and continue to be involved in those and see them thrive and grow. But I think into the near future, I'm excited to just have some space to clear my plate a little bit. And find new forms of inspiration, do some personal work. I'm excited to read more, and really set aside more dedicated time for reading. I feel like that sometimes gets lost in the wayside. I've been doing the startup founder thing for the last 7 years straight, which can be a lot. It can be sort of overwhelming at times, of course. If anyone who's been there and done that. But I'm excited to I'm excited to just have more time to pursue some artistic and creative passions, to be able to travel, and to see what sort of new opportunities, what do I want to throw myself into more fully. I know that there will be, plenty more, major endeavors in the coming months and years, but for the time being, I'm sort of letting myself be open to the serendipity and synchronicity of the universe, and hoping to have lots of really interesting intellectual and creative conversations with people, and see who and what I want to sort of work on and work with into the coming years. But make sure that I take time for myself, and don't forget to enjoy and really appreciate the important things in life that sometimes can get lost when you're in the fire of being a startup founder.
Sure. So hopefully I'll see you on the dance floor tomorrow morning. There's gonna be like hundreds of people, but I'll try and spot you out. Thanks for welcoming us into your place. And without further ado, we'll leave you with kind of the uncut draft one for the book interview. And hopefully if you like that information, you'll check out the 3 free stories below and keep up to date. Book will be out in January, but the information was so good that we felt we should just not do things twice and give it to you here on the web show. So hope you enjoy.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. So tell me about your formative experience and or worldview.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. Both my parents are small business owners and entrepreneurs themselves, and both very creative-minded people. So I sort of grew up in a household where, it was before the term maker had really been coined, but we were very much makers as a family. Growing up, always designing or making something. We had a whole workshop in our basement that we'd have band saws and woodworking equipment and metalworking equipment. And so growing up, my brother and I, he's 4 years younger than me, we would always be making something or also taking something apart. So we would love to take apart old electronics, VCRs, copy machines, telephones, computers. And my parents would often bring home old sort of broken electronics for Andrew and I to just go to town on with our wrenches and pliers and little screwdrivers, and then take all the pieces apart and usually not put them back together in some sort of working order, but instead take apart all the components and then rearrange them and reattach them through some form of Scotch tape and hot glue to make these sort of fantastical inventions, like antimatter converters and teleporters and small rockets and stuff. And there's definitely a good amount of make believe in there, sort of imagining these sort of fantastical machines and what they could do for us. But a lot of it really came down to experimenting and tinkering and sort of having an orientation of creative play. Creative play overlaid onto the world and onto how things worked. And as I went through my elementary and middle school years, I was also very much into as I went through my childhood, I was a huge space nerd as well. Nice. So not only did I love taking apart electronics and sort of making inventions, but big into astrophysics and space and astronomy. I used to read books on as much as I could understand them. Growing up, quantum mechanics and black holes and general relativity and all these things, superstrings, whatnot. And it was there was also a lot of imagination that went into that. I was a huge Star Wars fan, Star Trek as well. Read sort of a lot of fiction around outer space and the future and sort of what was possible and what sort of could be imagined in the world. I went to space camp in 5th grade, which was the highlight of my elementary school career. And so looking back, I think I had this orientation that I really loved as a kid around creativity, exploration, and experimentation. And a lot of that had to do with science and technology, right? But it also had to do with just life in general. And so, growing up, I think that those sort of the orientation around always be experimenting and thinking of life and new endeavors, new projects as experiments, and enjoying the creative exploration of something new is a really necessary, important approach. So, as I was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, in high school I knew that there was a bigger world out there that I wanted to see and be a part of. When I got into Yale for undergrad and moved to the East Coast. And while I was at Yale, started sort of exploring my entrepreneurial passions. Freshman year, I remember we started my roommates and I started an antique furniture business, which we discovered that Yale's library was being renovated. And they were selling off all these old card catalogs and sort of old antique furniture from campus. And so we would selectively curate and buy up, gorgeous antique pieces of furniture, and then put them online and sell them. We had an eBay store and had a whole, we wrote copy for them and created certificates of authenticity and the whole thing. And it was a good little small business, Well, I wouldn't call it a startup by any means, but learned a lot about customer service and shipping and handling and logistics and e-commerce and building a brand and positioning something which a university thought was just junk essentially, but to one of our customers was a really meaningful piece of history from one of the most storied universities in the world, right? Let's see, junior, but it was an experiment, right? And we didn't say, okay, this is going to be the next biggest antique furniture business in the world. No, it was an experiment. We thought, let's try this. It'll be interesting and fun, and there's a sort of creative enjoyment to it, right? Junior year, got together with a couple other buddies and started a social gaming startup. This is 2007, I think, when we started. It was a social gaming startup oriented around college rivalries, so taking college sports rivalries and putting them online, and sort of creating community online and allowing people to play these massively multiplayer games online with different rival schools and rival colleges and sports teams sort of playing against each other in these online tournaments. Did that for a couple years, raised almost $2 million in venture capital, never really figured out how to generate new revenue, which apparently is important for running a business, so they say. Making money is important. But did that for a few years. The recession hit in late 2008, early 2009, which was my senior year of college, and we couldn't raise any more money. Eventually, by the time, right when I was graduating, summer of 2009, we ran out of cash and had to shut the company down, right within months, which was tough. That was a failure. I mean, that was probably the biggest failure of my life. This thing that I had put my heart and soul into for years, that all of my friends and family knew was my baby, this startup, this endeavor, this thing that I was creating while I was still in college, but yet was very much a startup. We had an office in New York, we had some handful of full-time employees, we had a bunch of interns. It was a real thing. 150, 200,000 users online. And when it failed, you feel sometimes when something fails, you feel like a part of you has failed, right? There's a part of your soul in whatever it is that you're creating. There's a part of your DNA in there. And when the thing fails, you feel like, oh, am I a failure? Is something wrong with me? Did a part of me just die that I can't get back? In some ways, it feels a little bit like a relationship that you put years of effort and investment into, and time and care, and then when it falls apart, or if it falls apart, you feel like it's a part of you missing. It's a part of your heart that's missing, right? And it's the same thing is true with a startup or with an endeavor that you put so much work into. But I realized, in the process there that, okay, I'm not going to let this dissuade me. I'm not going to let this failure dissuade me. I'm going to let it. I'm going to soak it in. I'm not going to avoid it. I'm going to soak it in and say, okay, what can we learn from this? What can we take? How can I take away anything that I can from this experience and go on to create bigger and better, more successful experiments? Right? This experiment was a failure, but that's okay because it was ultimately. It is ultimately an experiment. Not everything is going to be perfect. Not everything is going to be successful. You talk to any successful entrepreneur, and most, if not all of them, have had failures in their background that are just not discussed as much, right? But there are plenty of failed experiments along the way. So shut that down. I started to really immerse I just moved to New York City, right? I didn't really I wanted to avoid taking a full-time job. I didn't want to do the corporate thing. I wanted to really continue to create and explore and run more entrepreneurial experiments and try to create something that was more successful. I just didn't know what that was going to be yet. So I started to really immerse myself in the startup and tech ecosystem in New York City. And what was interesting was to see the sort of burgeoning tech ecosystem in the context of post-recession New York. So technology was really starting to, this is now 2009, 2010, technology was starting to really ingratiate itself into so many different industries. You were seeing so many different industries. New York is already such a hub of industry and commercial activity, but so many of these industries were being transformed by the internet, transformed by technology. So technology was becoming, I think at the time, less of an industry in itself and more just a necessary way of doing business. So what I like to say is, the internet is the electricity of the 21st century, right? So if you were let's say you were starting it's just so necessary, right? Let's say you're starting a coffee shop today. You wouldn't go around telling people, hey, I'm starting an electricity-powered coffee shop, right? It would just be assumed that, okay, you just tell people to start a coffee shop, it would be assumed that you're using electricity, that you're leveraging electricity, that you're paying to be on their electrical grid, that you're hiring employees who know how to use electricity and not hurt themselves, that you're buying electrical appliances. It's just such a necessary part of the infrastructure for your business that almost goes without saying. And so in today's world, any new business, any new endeavor that you're going to be starting better be leveraging the internet as much as possible, better be having technology be a core competency of the functionality that you're building for your business, or else you're just wasting your time. It'd be like, the equivalent of starting an electricity-less coffee shop, which might be a very hipster coffee shop, but it would probably be much more expensive and time-consuming to run, right? If you weren't using electricity. Same thing in today's world for, I think, the internet and any business you want to start, no matter what vertical. So we were seeing this in New York City and started to see this sort of burgeoning ecosystem forming more and more and more. But I thought, this is still kind of ad hoc. This is still like a meetup there and an event here and a little co-working space there. What if we could bring it all together into one nucleus, one hub, and really be kind of a by the community, for the community place for social interaction, for professional collaboration, and for shared learning, for anyone who wants to pursue a career in technology, design, or business in New York City. And so that was really the concept for General Assembly. That was sort of the Vision 1.0. And we managed to get a grant from the city of New York and treated it as, okay, this is sort of an experimental platform. Nothing like this has ever been done before. We don't know what exactly it will become. We don't know what it's going to be. But it is an experiment, and it is an experiment worth pursuing, and we'll see what happens. And with that, right, at the very least, hopefully this can be sort of a break-even business that, the co-working memberships and the classes will throw off enough cash to pay rent and pay some staff, and at the very least it'll be a good platform for them doing something different in our entrepreneurial endeavors. Turns out that it started really working, and we realized, 6 months in, wow, we have a much bigger vision on our hands. This initial experiment to create a hub for the startup ecosystem in New York City was actually, the vision this larger vision was possible. We realized, so many people who actually have even people who have no formal background in tech, who wouldn't consider themselves a techie or who don't even work in a startup, but just want to be more relevant in the digital economy, want to be more relevant in the 21st century, are coming to General Assembly saying, hey, I'm going to take this class on coding. Hey, I'm going to take this class on how to raise venture capital. Hey, I'm going to take this class on how to design a mobile app. Hey, I'm going to take this class on how to negotiate a business contract. All this stuff that you never learn in college, but that's so relevant and necessary and useful in today's world. So we realize, okay, traditional higher education leaves off at a certain point, and the 21st century is moving pretty fast into the future in terms of what employers are looking for, in terms of what skills you need to be relevant in today's world. So we thought, all right, let's expand this experiment. Let's take General Assembly and really realize it in maybe its higher form, which is that we could create a whole new kind of educational institution, and one that hadn't been created before. I think traditionally, up until maybe the last couple of decades, if you were to try to look at the big systems in the world that define our world, the big institutions, you typically had one of two choices. You had the choice of saying, yes, I'm okay with the status quo. Yes, I believe in this institution or institutions as they are. They're working. Let's not change them. Let's continue them, right? Whether it's education or healthcare or criminal justice or government, any of these sort of large institutions that sort of run things. You could either be for the status quo, or you could say, no, these institutions are broken, they're wrong, they need to be reformed, they need to be fixed, they need to be abolished, right? But it was still oriented toward, that path, the reform path was still oriented toward the existing institutions. You had to be for or against the existing institutions. Those were sort of your options when it came to how you could orient yourself toward the big systems that define society. But now, and I think this is more true, especially in the last couple of decades, due to the democratization of technological tools and business building tools and the cheapening of the costs to just build a startup and build a product and distribute something widely, to masses on social media and otherwise, because of all those factors, you now have a third option. You don't have to be just for existing institutions or against the existing institutions, but you have this third option of being able to create your own new institutions, to create experimental forms of new institutions that you believe should exist. And that's very much what General Assembly is. We still operate within, there's still a regulatory environment we operate in, and we're licensed in all the states we're in and everything, but it's not like we're going and saying, all right, we're gonna dive deep into the existing, into an existing university system and try to, sort of reform it from the inside. Instead, we're saying, no, we're not here to,
you're not saying
we're not
college or
we're not saying the word disruptive, I think is hopefully we're at peak disruption, and we're now moving past that. We can find other words that are more interesting, but just the idea of doing something disruptive, I think kind of connotes destruction. It connotes the tearing down and the blowing up, right? And what we see it is, okay, college universities will continue doing their thing and will sort of live and die according to how the greater economy and society shapes out and what they do to themselves and what people are demanding. But the niche and the opportunity that we have is to say, where does college leave off? What General Assembly offers is not competitive with college, where college leaves off, or anything traditional higher ed leaves off. Between that and where today's world begins, that's where we play. So General Assembly is really a kind of a vocational school for the 21st century. It's about two big things. It's about inspiring you, inspiring people and empowering people, giving them big ideas and a powerful and engaged community where they can pursue their dreams, right? And it's also about giving people the practical, utilitarian skills and tools to actually go out and build whatever that they want to build or get that job that they want to get. So it can't just be about the skills or just about the big inspiration, but they think the combination of the two is really necessary. And so in building this new kind of educational institution, some of it we could take, from experiences, or we could take from history, but a lot of it we had to build and design as we were creating it, thinking, all right, how should admissions run? If you're creating a school or a whole new kind of educational institution and community and career development, institution, right? How should admissions run? What should the student experience be like? What should the design of the classrooms be like? How should instructor training work? How do you productize curriculum and make it available both online and offline when the experiences are so different, right? These are the sort of questions that we're always asking and we're always tinkering and experimenting with. So
I was just saying they probably all formed different experiments.
Yeah, and I think if you treat everything that you do as an experiment, every new endeavor or any new project as an experiment, experiments will succeed or fail. That's the nature of a science experiment, right? You can have a hypothesis, and you need to set up the experiment, right? But if you treat everything as a series of experiments, then whether you succeed or fail is sort of beside the point. As long as you're learning, as long as you're progressing, and as long as you continue to iterate and continue to do more experiments, try something, right, this doesn't work, this other thing did work, keep doing more of what works and less of what doesn't, and you're eventually headed in the right direction. But it's easy to have so much pressure on yourself, especially when you're a first-time entrepreneur or you're trying something new. You can feel, oh God, I have so much pressure. There's so much weight and gravity on this new thing. It needs to be successful, it needs to be big, it needs to be, $100 million plus business, it needs to, raise X amount of money, it needs to, have this sort of press impact, whatever. And so sometimes that can sort of lead to a paralysis of action. And it can put so much weight on something that you lose that sense of creative play, which is so necessary, which brings me to Daybreaker. So Daybreaker, when we started Daybreaker, I never intended, no one ever intended going into it saying, we're going to start a startup. We're going to start a business that is going to bring morning dance parties around the world and be a whole global brand and phenomenon and impact hundreds of thousands of people. No, we said we were frustrated with traditional nightlife in New York. We didn't like how negative and how substance oriented it was. I had just come back from Burning Man a couple months ago, and was very inspired for my second burn, and I was inspired by the creativity and the art and the openness and generosity and all the sort of beautiful experiences that you have and you witness out there, and you get to see what's possible with how humans can interact with each other, and with the innate sense of self-expression that you realize at Burning Man is inside people. This idea of that to be human is to create. That was one of the big realizations I've had over the years. To be human is to create. And that no matter who you are as a human, everyone is creative in their own right. Maybe some people it's painting, some people it's videography, some people it's the art of conversation or interviewing, some people it's textiles, some people it's building businesses, it's throwing events, whatever it is. But everyone has that creative capacity in them to manifest their ideas into reality in the world. Some people, they just maybe it's atrophy, or they haven't sort of spent the time letting that self-expression out. And so it was a big motivation for me coming back from Burning Man to think, all right, if every human is a creator, then how can we empower and inspire as many people as possible to self-express and to experiment and to turn their inner ideas into reality. Maybe it's in how they dress, maybe it's in how they dance, maybe it's in the sort of like businesses or projects that they create. But empowering people to create more and to self-express more and to connect with each other in that way was something that I really wanted to pursue. And so Daybreaker was this concept. We thought, all right, what if we turned the whole idea of nightlife on its head, get rid of all the negative things that nobody really likes from nightlife, all the negative aspects, and try to reimagine what a dance party could be. And we thought, all right, what if we do this in the morning? What if rather than having a dance party be how you end your night, what if we have an experience in the morning that's the best possible way to start your day? We thought, all right, well, what would the best possible way to start your day be? What would be like the most fun, most inspiring, most energetic, most expressive way to start off your day to fuel you for the rest of the day and work? We thought, well, it needs to be a dance party. But we don't want to serve alcohol. Nobody wants to drink alcohol in the morning. So we'll serve green juice and coffee and tea and smoothies, healthy beverages. And we'll have live musicians mixed with DJs, we'll have performers, and we'll start off maybe with a yoga class, we'll have some intention setting. And we just kept ideating, kept creating. But there's very little pretense. There's very little requirement that this needs to be something super large or super successful. Again, it was just an experiment. It was just a total blank slate, where the worst thing that can happen at our first event in December 2013, worst case, we'll have gotten up too early one day and nobody show up.
Yeah.
Nobody people don't buy tickets, they didn't want it or anything. Worst case, right? Best case, people love it, it's filled, and people want more of it. We can take it around the world and become a global phenomenon, right? That was the sort of we weren't even thinking that big, but that's the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
So without having so much pretense, we haven't raised any money for any outside capital for Daybreaker. It's all been bootstrapped. Every dollar we spend comes from ticket sold or sponsorship or something like that. So it keeps us pretty scrappy and honest, but also allows us to build a business and build a movement really that's sustainable and that is within the creative auspices of what we want to build, right? Because it's not about, okay, we need to have generate, be multiplied by the this size, or have some 3x revenue by a certain date or something like that. It still has remained, while it is very much a business, it also still has remained an art project at its core. But Daybreaker, if we had asked people in advance, if we'd asked too many people in advance and tried to get too much validation that what we were doing was going to be right and was going to be something large and successful and mainstream, we probably wouldn't have done it. It probably would have dissuaded us too much, you know?
Yeah.
Like if we had asked people, hey, you know, before we ran the first one, hey, what do you think about waking up really early on a weekday before work, earlier than you normally would, and going to get really sweaty and dance with a bunch of strangers, completely sober, and then go to work, straight to work? Most people would say, nope, that sounds terrible. No, thank you. Too weird, you know? And it was just a totally new form of behavior that nobody had done before,
Sure.
right? But we just did it, and we sort of showed people, hey, this is a thing. This could be a thing. You think it's a thing? We think it's a thing. You think it's a thing? Great, it's a thing. You know? And then there was enough momentum where people started going, and we actually avoided all press. We had no, we didn't talk to reporters, and we avoided all press for the first 6 months. We even had password protection on the event sites, and we actually discouraged people from even sharing it on social. So we sent out the email invite. We picked out like 300 friends and people who we thought these would be people who would, one, just be really down for the idea and the experiment, and two, who would be the right sort of core community to then expand and grow from there. But we said, look, share this with friends who you think, awesome friends who you think should attend and would love it, but don't post it publicly on social media. So we kept the experiment as small and as sort of tight as long as we possibly could to build up enough momentum in the community and make sure the experience was really solid, and that there was that core community who could then evangelize and keep the seed of the thing pure.
If I can jump in super quick. Feel free to agree or disagree with this, and let me know if this is something you'd want included in your verbiage, but it sounds like as you're keeping an experimentative mindset about everything, unlike most scientific experiments, you don't necessarily need to have the biggest sample size, and in fact, choosing a better small sample size is a good thing in the business world.
So, I think New York is a good petri dish for cultural experiments, I'll say. Because, like, you know, there's the Frank Sinatra. Is it Frank Sinatra? You can make it anywhere, right?
Well, no, I mean more
fact
like,
check that.
yeah, like when, even with the antique business, like you only needed a few people to validate your experiment. You only needed a small sample size. You didn't need like a normal scientific experiment to have like all this data.
Sure, totally.
Do you agree with that? Do you not agree?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I think
Would
once.
that be you don't want that to be part of your message. You do. It's just simply an observation I'm having from listening.
I mean, sample sizes of an experiment are totally based on the experiment itself. So,
fair enough.
I don't know. I mean, there's like, was our sample size statistically significant? I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. Back to Daybreaker.
And maybe like ask the question a different way.
It's not important. I just like in the science world, you have to have like a certain statistical significance, whereas if you were approaching your life as an experiment, maybe you don't need to hit statistical significance to have a significant experiment.
Right. Yes, I would agree with that. And I think, you know, it's like, you know, you want some validation of the experiment. You want enough validation of the experiment where you can use the results of the experiment in addition to your gut to keep driving forward.
Sure.
So if nobody had showed up, or very, very few people had showed up on that first Daybreaker, that would have been good insight. Like, all right, we did something really wrong here. Either like this isn't going to work, or there was some like real problem. Maybe our ticketing site was broken, or like we didn't know enough people, or something like that. Or we invited the wrong people, right? But because the first event was sold out, and more importantly, beyond, and this is probably to your question, beyond it was less about the number of people. We only had 180 people show up at the first one. It wasn't that we had thousands and thousands of people at the first one. It was the fact that the people who went had such a beautiful and glorious positive reaction and time there, and that the experience was so amazing and good and like warm, and filled with so much joy that people said, I've never been to an experience like that before. Please do more, often. That, the fact that people loved it in its first form meant that, okay, we found product market fit basically on day one, which granted is a very lucky thing. I've been through companies where you don't find that for a long time. But Daybreaker just happened to work out where, we modified and worked on the product and experience, and obviously it's been through a lot of iterations since then to make it even better and more expansive and to take it around the world. But we basically hit product market fit on the first event, which was really cool to see, because it was this completely new form of behavior. Nobody ever done anything like this before. Woken up, at 6, 7 in the morning, going to dance their face off with glowing jellyfish from Burning Man and people in weird costumes and live saxophones on the dance floor and a DJ playing and orange juice and coffee and all these different wow moments and surprises and some intention reading and a big group hug and all this stuff. And it was just such a weird, interesting thing, but it worked, and the first one worked enough for the people who participated that we said, yes, this is something. Let's keep going. Let's see what this thing can become. Let's continue to run experiments and see what this thing can become. Because we didn't know, and we still, as we went through, we, for a good year or two, we thought, we're still not going to say this is going to be, a huge business. We thought, no, let's continue to run these experiments and continue to grow this art project. Let's continue to see what Daybreaker could become. And because of that, we got to pursue it as this form of creative exploration. We got to really play with it creatively, which a lot of entrepreneurs don't get a chance to do, I think, in today's world, with boards and with venture capital and with just so much gravitas and weight around what it means societally to start your own business. And when you raise money, the sort of golden handcuffs, if you will, that can come with that. There's a lot of pressure, and sometimes that pressure can push out that very necessary creative exploration, that very necessary form of play that I think true innovation and true invention requires. So when I said to be human is to create, very much so, but to be human is also to be able to play, and to be able to play and explore creatively. Too much pressure can get you down. It can lead to less exotic or less interesting outcomes. If someone said, "Hey, here's $1 million seed funding to start an event series that will be, the very successful event series in 15 cities around the world within 2.5 years, and you need to hit this many cities and have this much revenue and have this much sponsorship, whatever." If that had been the dictum, if that had been the goal, probably wouldn't have started Daybreaker, right? But instead, if the goal was, let's create like a completely new form of experience, something that could be the best possible way to start your day, and that doesn't have to appeal to the masses, but that we think could be something that could create more love and more self-expression, more generosity and more openness and more positivity in the world, then if that was the goal, which it was, then we created Daybreaker, And now fast forward, we have sort of mainstream, major brands who are hitting us up inbound because they want to work with Daybreaker, and they think it's something that is having a positive impact on culture and society, and they want to be a part of that.
Yeah, obviously the main theme or takeaway through everything is experimentation. Do you have any practical strategies, advice that a reader of the book should potentially utilize to insert more experimentation into their life?
Make sure that you never lose that childlike or that childhood sense of play and of being able to look at the world with wonder and awe and enjoyment, and always allow yourself to find time and find moments and give yourself space for creative expression and for creative experimentation. That could be in the form of anything that you want. I don't want to prescribe how people should be creative, but to be human is to create. And so make sure that you're taking time, every week or on a very ongoing, regular basis, even if there's not money attached, even if there's not a business attached, even if it's not necessarily going to become something much larger, but make sure that you're spending time being creative and trying out, sort of giving yourself that space to self-express. Maybe it's coming to Daybreaker wearing, crazy costumes, right, and dancing like you've never danced before, right? Maybe it is turning an art project into something larger and scaling it to more people, into something bigger, whatever it is. But when I think about, beyond that, I guess when thinking about, experiments, this is an orientation thing as well. If when you think about experimenting, if you basically treat any new endeavor, any new project as an experiment, and realize that, okay, I'm going to think about this as an experiment. I'm not going to think about this as, okay, this has to succeed or else, this thing has to succeed or else I'm a failure. Right? That's the wrong way to start anything new. Instead, treat it as an experiment and say, okay, I'm going to run a lot of experiments. I have many more tricks up my sleeve. I have many more endeavors. I have many more projects that I could pursue. Each one of them is going to be an experiment. Going in, as a good scientist would, some experiments are going to fail, some are going to succeed. But either way, you're going to learn along the way, and you're going to take meticulous notes, and you're going to be very thoughtful about what exactly is succeeding and what exactly is failing and why. And try to learn as much as you can. And if you continue to do that in series over time, always learning as much as you can from every experiment, whether or not it succeeds or fails, then your experiments will keep getting better and better, and you will, as a scientist / human / entrepreneur, you will always be learning more and more, and you'll always be growing wiser, and what you create in the future, after having run a bunch of experiments and learned from them, should be much better off than when you were so green.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to add?
One of the things I love is thinking about experiences as an art form. We talk a lot about user experience design, right? And that usually refers to like what happens, or how people should think about what happens here, right? And it's about online experience design for online experiences. But in some ways, it's a lot more interesting and compelling, at least totally, into a different world, to think about experience design in the real world, right? Experience design all around us, using all of our senses and our emotions and our psyche and our social interactions and all of that. I was a sociology major in college, and so it's funny, like my sociologist lens is sort of how I look at like a lot of the world, and I think it has been a formative lens by which to pursue the things I've pursued, starting new kinds of educational institutions, or creating communities and experiences that change how people self-express and wake up in the morning, right? And these sorts of things. And just think about how do people work, how do social groups and social interactions happen, and how can I like design and create experiences and space and community in ways that move people forward and push people forward in a positive way. I think there's so many huge, intractable, difficult to solve problems in the world, and those problems will not be solved by one small group of people, but they may be solved, and hopefully will be solved, by a very, very large group of very smart, very empowered, very educated, very inspired people. So how do you go about creating a very large group of smart, inspired, educated, empowered people? I think Daybreaker and I think General Assembly are two shots on goal at that concept. I think in general, creating the right kinds of experiences, the right kinds of transformative experiences that can shift people's mindsets, can give them new approaches, can change how they think about the world or what they're capable of, whether skill-wise or mindset-wise or creatively or whatever. But creating and designing transformational experiences is both an art and a science, which I love, right? The two of those. I said I think of myself as a creative and an artist, but also, ever since I was a kid, I've always been a science and space nerd, right? So the art and the science of this is sort of cool. But creating transformational experiences and then building communities around these transformational experiences is, I think, a way to describe both General Assembly and Daybreaker, right? Those two things sort of fall into that description at the highest level. And what's great about, or what's so powerful about that, I think, and where the world needs more of this, is transformational experiences, when done properly, can accelerate people's lives and empower them in a way that moves them forward in their careers and their lives, and can give them the education or the skills or the inspiration to go out and change the world for the better, and go out and solve their problems and create more goodness and more opportunity and more quality and more joy, more love in the world for everyone else. You know, like, I'm not going to solve the world's problems, you're not going to solve the world's problems, but if we get enough people to be oriented in the right way and to accelerate them and educate them and empower them and inspire them as much as we possibly can, and allow them to be their fullest version, their best versions of themselves, and I think that's like the best, you know, that elevation of as much of humanity as possible and as thoroughly as possible, that is going to be our best chance at solving, you know, the challenges that we face in the world today and tomorrow.
Yeah, I like 100% resonate with that. That's the experience of being exposed to and reading 2 billion under 20 and 3 billion under 30 is exactly that. That's the experiment we're running.
Yeah.
It's how to get as many people as possible to, you know, figure out what they're passionate about, figure out what their purpose is, start acting on that, and then collaborate with others to solve big pressing problems. So, all comes together.
Cool.
Thank you for watching another episode of Stories from the 3 Billion Under 30. Now, if you want to see more stories from the 3 Billion Under 30, we actually have a book coming out in January called 3 Billion Under 30. And if you go and click the link in the description below, you can get 3 free stories from the next book right now. Not in January, now. So check it out and follow the rest of the web series in order to see more interviews just like this one.